Welcome to Module 10, Finishing the Return. By the end of this module, you will know how to complete tax return preparation and be ready for quality review. You'll be aware how to get the most out of the quality review process. You'll understand the steps relevant to wrapping up your time with the taxpayer. You'll be able to provide auxiliary tax services to appropriate taxpayers, and you'll have a summary of resources related to finishing a tax return. This module is broken up into completing tax preparation, learning from quality review, last steps, extra services, and we'll end with a recap and resources. So let's talk about completing return preparation. Once the taxpayer's information has been entered, it's time to give it all a quick review. First, look over the form of 13614-C, also known as the intake sheet. Make sure every question has been answered. Resolve any unsure answers. Ensure that for every yes answer, there is an entry on the return or you have made a note to explain why no entry is needed. Complete all of the appropriate shaded areas regarding qualifying children and qualifying relatives, as well as ACA. Review all of the source documents to make sure everything has been entered. If the tax software indicates any error messages, resolve the errors or omissions. If the taxpayer brought a copy of last year's tax return, review it to see if there might be an issue that's been overlooked. Be sure to get it all organized for the reviewer. Note, it is the policy of some tax sites to not reveal the refund or balance due amount prior to quality review. Check with your site coordinator to find out local practices. If the taxpayer is getting a refund, you can encourage the taxpayer to use a direct deposit rather than receiving a paper check. You can point out that direct deposit is about 2 weeks faster and that it is more secure than a paper check. Explain that the taxpayer can split the refund into 2 or 3 accounts, or use part of the refund to purchase a U.S. savings bond. Splitting refunds and buying savings bonds can be both accomplished using the Form 8888, Allocation of Refund. If the return includes EITC or additional child tax credit, tell the taxpayer that the IRS will not process the refund until after February 15th. Explain to early filers who are getting both or one of these credits that the delay is mandated by law for all taxpayers with these credits and that the taxpayer should go ahead and file as usual. To complete the direct deposit section, you need the name of the bank routing number, it's always 9 digits, the account number, it could be any number of digits, and the type of account, checking or savings. Verify this information from the taxpayer's check or other bank document. Be sure to make sure that the direct deposit numbers are correct. You don't want to send the taxpayer's refund off to the wrong account. If the taxpayer has a balance due, review the ways to pay, either direct debit, sending a paper check, or various electronic payment options. Explain that the balance owed is due on April 15th, 2020. Point out that this is true even if the return is filed earlier in the tax season. Advise that paying the total due by April 15th is best, and that late payment will result in penalty and interest. If the taxpayer wants to delay filing, explain that a late filed return will cost much more in penalties. The taxpayer should file on time, even if they cannot pay the amount owed. Explain that the IRS often allows taxpayers to pay on an installment agreement. If the taxpayer owes a large amount of money that they are unable to pay, suggest that they contact a low-income taxpayer clinic or an LITC for assistance. If you are also preparing one or more state income tax returns, go through similar completion steps to arrange for direct deposit of any refund or address a balance due. And please note there are 7 states that are without income tax. Let's figure out how we can learn from the quality review. Every VITA return is reviewed by an experienced preparer. The reviewer looks over the intake sheet, the taxpayer's document, and the return to make sure that it is complete and correct. In most cases, the reviewer looks at the completed return on the computer screen. Often, the reviewer will have questions for the preparer or the taxpayer. Generally, the return is not printed and the final results are not given to the taxpayer until after quality review is complete. Here's what you, the preparer, should do. Explain to the taxpayer that all returns are reviewed to make sure everything is correct. Before the review starts, discuss any questions that you might have with the reviewer and point out any issues that may be problematic. If the reviewer finds an error or omission, make sure you understand what needed to be changed. Try not to worry or feel self-conscious. All preparers, both new and experienced, occasionally make mistakes. See it as a learning opportunity and be grateful that the reviewer has got your back. If things are not clear to you at the time of the review, don't hesitate to go back to the reviewer or do some more research on your own to get more information. And now we're in the last steps. If the return is going to be filed electronically, print out one copy of the return and give it to the taxpayer to keep with their records. If the return is going to be paper filed, print out 2 copies, one for the taxpayer to mail to the IRS and one for their records. Make sure the taxpayer understands how the return is going to be filed, electronic or paper. If it's electronic, the taxpayer doesn't need to do anything. The tax site will transmit the returns. On paper, the taxpayer must mail the federal return to the IRS and the state return to the appropriate Department of Revenue. Make sure that the taxpayer has the correct addresses. After reviewing the return with the taxpayer, ask them if they have any questions. Most returns are filed electronically, and the taxpayer and the taxpayer's spouse on a joint return signs the Form 8879 IRS e-file signature authorization, which gives the VITA site the permission to transmit the return electronically to the IRS. Give the taxpayer the signed Form 8879 to keep with their tax records. If the return is being filed by mailing a hard copy to the IRS, the taxpayer must sign the original return that will be mailed. Explain to the taxpayer that the return was prepared based on the information that they provided and that they alone are responsible for the information on the return. And as always, be sure to thank the taxpayer for coming to your site and invite the taxpayer to return next year. Let's talk about some extra services. If the taxpayer has a balance due, discuss some prevention tactics. The taxpayer may need to update their W-4 at work to increase their income tax withholding. The IRS withholding calculator can be a useful tool to get the withholding just right. If the taxpayer has income not covered by withholding and expects to owe more than $1,000, then the taxpayer should make quarterly estimated tax payments using Form 1040 ES. A big refund is nice, but often taxpayers have way more withholding than they need and might choose to decrease that amount withheld. Although adjusting withholding on W-4 to have less income tax withheld means a smaller refund at the end of the year, it also means larger paychecks during the year, which might be better for the taxpayer overall. Often taxpayers need advice and guidance regarding record keeping. Point out the amounts listed on the Schedule C that you just prepared to help the taxpayer understand what is needed for the tax return preparation. If the taxpayer has enough to itemize, explain the kinds of records that would be useful to complete Schedule A. Always mention, as a preparer, you can enter reasonable amounts on the tax return without seeing documentation, but the IRS might later ask to see records to substantiate the items on the return. Sometimes you discover that the taxpayer is experiencing a problem for another tax year. If the taxpayer has a controversy with the IRS, a recommendation might be to visit an LITC. An LITC is a free service that handles both collection and audit issues. Often these kinds of issues are discovered by the taxpayer's answer to Part 5, Question 10 of the intake sheet. Did you receive a letter from the IRS? Often a yes answer to this question warrants a discussion. If you think your taxpayer may need some type of help with a controversy, talk to your site coordinator or an experienced preparer. The Taxpayer Advocate, or TAS, launched a Taxpayer Roadmap for 2019, which guides clients through the tax system. As you can see, it is listed below, but also it'll be linked at the very end of this presentation. Let's end with some recap and resources. Your responsibilities are to finish the return preparation to the best of your ability. Encourage the use of direct deposit for refund returns. If there's something you don't understand, ask someone or research. Be sure not to guess or solely depend on the software. Make sure that the return is quality reviewed before the taxpayer leaves. Learn all you can from quality review. Answer all of the taxpayer's questions and provide relevant advice regarding other tax issues. Here is a full list of resources, but the main one is your site coordinator. Every Vitus site has one, and that person is in the best position to help you from everything from tax law to local forms and procedures. Up next, Module 11, Talking to Taxpayers.